His banner over me is love, my patron saint. I love my banner. But Slasher raised the standard, raised the standard. He's always raised the standard. Um, and his banner over me is love. The whole thing with banner. And then, of course, the betrayer, Doctor's banner. Anyway, so of course it's episode 214. And oh, too much, too many buttons to push. I'm just sad.
Escalator. Sound like alligator better. Well, I have to run.
Oh, I just got home. Well, I changed. We'll go and have some dinner.
Oh, I'm sorry, Bill. I have to meet my agent at the hotel. It's a big deal in the wind. The studio wants me to play St. Joan in Spain.
Why Spain?
Well, the countryside is perfect and...
All right. So, 214. This banner over me is love. She made me the banner. And in 1967, I held up my Joan of Arc banner. 6 plus 68. 67. I was 4, so I'm 2 years younger than Buffy. The next sitting opened. The next sitting opened on Thursday, the 1st of March. 58 judges present. The others rested. That's a long chapter. As usual, Joan was required to take an oath without reservations. She showed no temper this time. She considered herself well buttressed by the process verbal compromise which Cauchon was so anxious to repudiate and creep out of. So she merely refused distinctly and decidedly, and added in a spirit of fairness and candor, but as to matters set down in the process verbal, I will freely tell the whole truth. Yes, as freely and fully as if I were before the Pope. Here was a chance. We had 2 or 3 popes then. The 2 or 3 popes. That was a time when there were competing popes. Only one of them could be the true pope, of course. Everybody judiciously shirked the question of which was the true pope and refrained from naming him, it being clearly dangerous to go into particulars in the matter. In the southern France, they started a Vatican and they had a pope. It's the 1100s. Here was an opportunity to trick an unadvised girl into bringing herself into peril, and the unfair judge had lost no time in taking advantage of it. He asked in a plausibly indolent and absent way, "Which one do you consider to be the true pope? Which one do you consider to be the true pope?" The house took an attitude of deep attention and so waited to hear the answer and see the prey walk into the trap. But when the answer came, it covered the judge with confusion, and you could see many people covertly chuckling. For Joan asked in a voice and manner which almost deceived even me, so innocent it seemed, "Are there 2? One of the ablest priests in that body and one of the best sweaters there." It's like swearers. It's like sweaters. One of the best swearers there spoke right so that half the house heard him and said, "By God, it was a master stroke." As soon as the judge was better of his embarrassment, he came back to the charge, but was prudent and passed by Joan's question. "Is it true that you received a letter from the Count of Armagnac asking you which of the 3 popes he ought to obey?" "Yes," and answered it. Copies of both letters were produced and read. Joan said that hers had not been quite strictly copied. She said she had received the Count's letter when she was just mounting her horse, and added, "So, in dictating a word or 2 of reply, I said I would try to answer him from Paris or somewhere where I could be at rest." She was asked again which pope she had considered the right one. I was not able to instruct the Count of Armagnac as to which one ought to obey. Then she added, with a frank fearlessness which sounded fresh and wholesome in that din of trimmers and shuffles. But as for me, I hold that we are bound to obey our Lord, the Pope who was at Rome. The matter was dropped. Then they produced and read a copy of Joan's first effort at dictating, a proclamation summoning the English to retire from the siege of Orleans and vacate France. Truly a great and fine production for an unpracticed girl of 17. Do you acknowledge as your own the document which has just been read? Yes, except that there are errors in it, words which make me give myself too much importance. I saw what was coming. I was troubled and ashamed. For instance, I did not say, deliver up to the maid, rendez à la pucelle, rendez à la pucelle. I said, deliver up to the king, rendez au roi. I did not call myself commander. All these are words which my secretary substituted, or mayhap he misheard me or forgot what I said. She did not look at me when she said it. She spared me that embarrassment. I hadn't misheard her at all and hadn't forgotten. I changed her language purposely, for she was commander in chief and entitled to call herself so, and it was becoming and proper too. And who was going to surrender anything to the king? At that time, a stick, a cipher. If any surrender was done, it would be the noble maid of Vaucouleurs, already famed and formidable, though she was not yet struck a blow. Ah, there would have been a fine and disagreeable episode for me there if that pitiless court had discovered that the very scribbler of that piece of dictation, secretary to Joan of Arc, was present, and not only present, but helping build the record, and not only that, but destined at a far distant day to testify against lies and perversions smuggled into it by Cauchon and deliver them over to eternal infamy. Do you acknowledge that you dictated this proclamation? I do. Have you repented of it? Do you retract that? Ah, then she was indignant. No, not even these chains. And she shook them. Not even these chains can chill the hopes that I uttered there. And more. She rose and stood a moment with a divine, strange light kindling in her face. Then her words burst forth as in a flood. I warn you now that before 7 years a disaster will smite the English, oh, many-fold greater than the fall of Orleans, and silence, sit down. And then soon after they will lose all of France. Now consider these things. The French armies no longer existed. The French cause was still standing still. Our king was standing still. There was no hint that by and by the Constable Richemont would come forward and take up the great work of Joan of Arc and finish it. In fact, of all this, Joan made the prophecy, made it with perfect confidence, and it came true. For within 5 years, Paris fell, 1436, and our king, oh, it's 1436, oh, that was Hildegard. No, this is 1436. Still before the Reformation, still before there was any other church. It's the only Christian church for 1,500 years, the one that everyone relies on. So the first part of the prophecy was then fulfilled. In fact, almost the entire prophecy. For with Paris in our hands, the fulfillment of the rest of it was assured. 20 years later, all of France was out in a single town, Calais. Now that will remind you of an earlier prophecy of Joan's. At that time, she wanted to take Paris and could have done it with ease if our king had but consented. She said that that was the golden time, that with Paris ours, all France would be ours in 6 months. But if this golden opportunity to recover France was wasted, said she, I give you 20 years to do it in. She was right. After Paris fell in 1436, the rest of the work had to be done city by city, castle by castle, and it took 20 years to finish it. Yes, it was the first day of March 1431, there in the court, that she stood in the view of everybody and uttered the strange and incredible prediction. Now and then in this world, somebody's prophecies turns up correct, but when you come to look into it, there is sure to be considerable room for suspicion that the prophecy was made after the fact. But here the matter is different. There, in the court, Joan's prophecy was set down in the official record at the hour and moment of its utterance, years before the fulfillment, and there you may read it to this day. 25 years after Joan's death, the record was produced in the great court of the rehabilitation and verified under oath by Manshaw and me, and surviving judges of our court confirmed the exactness of the record in their testimony. Joan's standing utterance on the now so celebrated 1st of March stirred up a great turmoil, and it was some time before it quieted down again. Naturally, everybody was troubled, for a prophecy is a grisly and awful thing, whether one thinks it ascends from hell or comes down from heaven. All that these people felt sure of was the inspiration back of it was genuine and puissant. They would have given their right hands to know the source of it. At last, the question began again. How do you know that those things are going to happen? I know it by revelation, and I know it as surely as I know that you are here before me. This sort of answer was not going to allay the spreading uneasiness. Therefore, after some further dallying, the judge got through the subject of one and took up one which he could enjoy more. What language does your voices speak? French? Saint Marguerite too? Verily, why not? She is on our side, and not on the English. Saints and angels who do not condescend to speak English? A grave affront. They could not be brought into the court and punished for contempt, but the tribunal could take silent note of Joan's remarks and remember it against her, which they did. It might be useful by and by. Do your saints and angels wear jewelry, crowns, rings, earrings? To Joan, questions like this were profane frivolities and not worthy of serious notice. She answered indifferently, but the question brought to her mind another matter, and she turned upon Cauchon and said, I had two rings. They had been taken away from me during my captivity. You have one of them. It's the gift of my brother. Give it back to me. If not to me, then I pray that it be given to the church. The judges conceived the idea that maybe these rings were for the working of enchantment. Perhaps they could be made to do Joan a damage. What is the other ring? The Burgundians have it. Where did you get it? My father and mother gave it to me. Describe it. It's a plain and simple and has Jesus and Mary engraved upon it. Everybody could see that there was not a valuable equipment to do devil's work with, so that trail was not worth following. Still, to make sure, one of the judges asked Joan if she had ever cured sick people by touching them with the ring. She said no. Now, as concerning the fairies that were used to abide near the Domremy, whereof there are many reports and traditions, it is said that your godmother surprised these creatures on a summer's night dancing under the tree called La Delphine de Beaumont. It is not possible that your pretend saints and angels are but those fairies. Is that in your process? She made no answer. Have you not conversed with Saint Marguerite and Saint Catherine under that tree? I do not know. Or by the fountain near the tree? Yes, sometimes. What promises do they make you? None, but such as they had God's warrant for. But what promises do they make? That is not in your process. Yet I will say this much. They told me that the king would become master of his kingdom in spite of his enemies. And what else? There was a pause, then she said humbly, they promised to lead me to paradise. If faces do really betray what is passing in men's mind, a fear came upon many in the house at this time that maybe, after all, a chosen servant and herald of God was here being hunted to her death. The interest deepened, movements and whispers ceased, the stillness became almost painful.